Good evening. You are listening to Right on Campus, the UW-Eau Claire College Republican podcast. Good evening. You're listening to Right on Campus, the UW-Eau Claire College Republicans podcast. As always, I'm Ryan, the Vice Chair of UWEC College Republicans, and I'm joined with my co-host and working partner, Tatiana, the Chair of UWEC College Republicans.
Hello.
We're also joined tonight by one of our most dedicated members of the club, Jackson.
Hello.
We have a great show for you tonight. Tonight we'll be discussing a current events catch-all. So all of the recent current events we're going to be kind of going over and giving a little bit of commentary on. But before we get into that, we wanted to allow Jackson to have the opportunity to introduce himself and talk a little bit about how he found CR and maybe answer a few more questions. So Jackson, who are you and how did you find CR?
Yeah, so obviously my name is Jackson. I'm an economics and finance major. I'm a freshman here at UW-Eau Claire. So when I first got to college, I really did not realize that CR was a thing. So I was planning on starting a Turning Point chapter. And after a little looking around on campus and online, I found that CR was a thing, and in one of my classes, actually, is the same room that we do CR meetings in. So I saw the message on the board that said, CR meetings tonight at 7 in this room, so I pulled up, and that's kind of my introduction to the story.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Nice. So what kind of a role does CR play in your life? Like, you know, what do you do you enjoy coming? Do you what do you get out of coming to CR?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, CR is like, it's really just a great place to kind of just decompress, because I feel like there are so many opposing views to mine on campus, whether it be from professors or other students, that CR just gives me kind of a safe space, I guess.
Yeah.
Funny.
To use our language.
But, yeah, I mean, I think that's really what CR plays for me.
That's
Great.
a really good way to put that.
That's a really good answer.
I
like that. So give me a little bit of understanding. How often do you feel like you're running into politics in general on your day-to-day life at the university? Like, are you seeing stuff in your classrooms? Do professors talk about it? Do peers talk about it? Like, outside of CR, how much of a role does politics play in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, so I mean, most of my professors are pretty biased in the way they teach. So, for example, my economics course, we always talk about, like, the trade-off between inflation and unemployment, and that's just always a big thing that comes up. And they strongly kind of insist that, Trump is bad, other political parties are good.
Cool. Alrighty, are you guys good? We run into the first segment?
No, thank you. Thank you very much for introducing yourself there, Jackson. I know on the 2 episodes ago now, when Grace was on, she had mentioned a little shout out to you.
Yeah, she did.
Because you did kind of get our club going by inviting a lot of people.
Yeah, so thank you for that.
Yeah. Okay, so moving into segment 1, we're going to talk about something kind of big that happened in the economic realm of our world. We know that Trump has been imposing these tariffs, and there's a lot of controversy around them.
Yeah.
And a big reason why he's been doing this is to move companies back to America.
Right.
And this happened with a major company. Apple is investing $500 billion towards U.S. economic development.
Yeah.
And they're moving multiple of their headquarters and larger plants to America.
Yeah.
And they've stated that this is their largest ever spend commitment.
Yeah.
Which is huge.
That is true.
Some of their plans include they want to build an AI server manufacturing plant, I think down in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
And then they also want to double their advanced manufacturing fund and raise it to $10 billion.
Okay.
They also want to hire 20,000 employees specifically for research, AI, and silicone engineering. And so, we talked about AI a lot in the last episode.
Yeah.
But these are all the up and coming things in the technology realm. So it's great to see that happening here on our soil. And then they just want to keep expanding throughout multiple states as well in a broad sense. But their CEO, Tim Cook, stated that their company is bullish on the future of American innovation.
Yeah.
And so it's great to see that. Trump obviously had his typical Truth Social reaction.
Yeah.
Do you want to do your Trump impression of it?
Apple has just announced a record $500 billion investment in the United States of America. The reason, faith in what we have, in what we're doing, without which they wouldn't be investing 10 cents. Thank you, Tim Cook and Apple! 3 exclamation points. Everything is in all caps.
Typical Trump. And so even beyond Apple, there's been quite a few other business investments in the U.S. since Trump has taken office.
Yeah.
$600 billion from Saudi Arabia. We have the $500 billion from Apple. Some various other companies, too, as well, have been investing billions of dollars. And it's really cool to see that. So with that being said,
Right.
why are we seeing these companies move to the U.S.? Is it the tariffs? Is it something else Trump's doing? What do we think?
Yeah, so I think that, there are 2 main reasons, one of which being the tariffs, and you guys have gone into this in other episodes, so we'll kind of skip that one. But I think the other reason is we saw the U.S. try to ban TikTok. So if it's not mainly American-made, I think that might be something that the companies are worried about, and I think that might be a big reason why they're shifting to the U.S.
Oh, that's an interesting point.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a great one to lead with, this segment, following our last episode. I really think AI, the one episode isn't enough to really characterize the impact that AI and this AI race and revolution is going to and is currently having on the American economy and on the global economy. I think, why is Apple doing this? So I was reading, I think it was the Wall Street Journal. There's this guy, William Kerwin. He's an analyst with Morningstar Investment Research Group. He kind of had a take that I kind of agree with. The thing is I think conservatives are getting a little bit out over their skis with some of this. Like we're very quick to forgive and forget that like companies like Apple and Facebook and Amazon, Washington Post, owned by Bezos, they weren't friendly to Trump, and they've never been friendly to Trump. And
exactly.
I think that it's hard to understate what this election did. This 2024 election really cemented the popular support and the popular political mandate for the Trump agenda. And I don't think that these companies agree with it. I don't think that these CEOs personally agree with it. And I don't think the mission statements of these companies agree with it. But what I think this election has done and is allowed Trump to assume office and institute his tariff regime. I guess you could call it that, even though none of them are really in practice at the moment. It's more of a threat thing than it is, actual in practice. I think Apple's playing ball. I think that they're looking at that and they're recognizing, 70% of our products are manufactured in China.
Yeah.
And if Trump, because that's the thing is, Apple's investing $500 billion in America to build these AI data centers. They're not reshoring any of the manufacturing of their products.
Yeah.
The products are staying manufactured in China. If a tariff comes down, they will pay that tariff. And so that's where Apple is going to have to, figure out, if they invest $500 billion into the president's initiative to jumpstart AI, maybe they could get in the good graces and be exempt from a tariff.
Yeah.
And so there's that incentivization factor, specifically with Apple. But yeah, I think generally this is a really good thing. It's a good thing that we're trying to lead from the front, and we're trying to get these American companies to invest in America, and it's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to reshore 70% product manufacturing overnight. But it's I think this is a really good first step. And Apple's not the only one. So OpenAI and then a Japanese tech investor
Yeah.
company called SoftBank, as well as
Okay.
Oracle,
Oh, yeah, I did see
are
that.
looking to spend this $500 billion in AI data centers. And that's
Wow.
what is this? Like the Star. It's Trump's initiative to have the AI manufacturing, the AI race here in America. But yeah, so that's the thing is, to me, it seems like, without further commitment, we can't jump to the conclusion that this is the best thing ever and they're reshoring all their manufacturing, because they're not. But they are certainly playing a major role in the tip of the American spear with AI. So that's my take. What do you think?
Yeah, so I agree with a lot of what you said. I think a lot of it has to do with not necessarily just the tariffs, but also the amount that Trump has said he wants to invest in AI development and his push for innovation within America. I think you want to be in a country where innovation is spurred on, and
For sure.
you don't want to be in a country where, you're focused on other things instead. And I think that's what we've been for a long time.
Yeah.
And I believe Apple was moving from Mexico,
Okay.
which also could play a role based
Okay.
on the kind of America Mexico banter that's been going on.
Yeah.
And so I think the tariffs do play a role, not just in the sense of the economics of it itself, but the power Trump is showing that we have as America,
Yeah.
and the economic value we have for companies.
Yeah.
And so I think that also plays a large role. But yeah.
Yeah, I think, this whole the attitude of this administration is just totally different than anything we've seen in recent memory, and it's really manifesting itself in this, economic powerhouse.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And I think the American economy and like consumers in America and just people, the attitude about the American economy for 20 plus years has just been, we run it. We run the
Right.
world. We're the best innovators. And with what AI is presenting is like, it's this brand new frontier where we don't lead at the moment. And
Yeah.
it's like, it's not that we don't necessarily lead. It's just the race hasn't been finished.
Exactly.
We're not the clear established leader. And it's causing this uncertainty that is not good for an investment-based, financial-based economy, which we have. And it's like that's causing these, firm owners and billionaires and these companies to really realize, like, we have this opportunity here to get in on the ground floor of a truly revolutionary field of AI. And so I think for that reason, it is a really good thing, like that this is happening. And, rising tides raise all ships kind of thing. So, that's my piece on this.
Yeah. What about, so looking at, we see what it's doing for Apple, but what is it doing for us as a country and our economy?
So I think it's actually going to bring more money into the U.S. economy. We're going to see less unemployment, as we're going to have a lot more jobs available for the general public. Less unemployment, but we're going to see a small bump in inflation due to higher wages for making those items, manufacturing, doing the research. I think overall, though, it's going to be a net positive for our economy.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, I concur.
Okay. Well, we can go ahead and move on to our next segment then. The governor's dinner that is hosted at the White House, or conference, I don't know what the official name for it is, but happened last week. And yeah, so there was a few things that went down there. First, I'd just like to highlight, I don't know how many of you guys saw, but Trump posted on his Truth Social kind of bantering with Trudeau and invited him to that dinner.
That's so great.
Yeah. So that was great. But Trudeau did not show up.
Shoot. The
He was-
51st state governor.
Yeah, he was busy attending to his state that's falling
Yeah,
apart.
he's crippled. Yeah, that's just too bad.
But then Trump also called out the governor of Maine.
Yeah,
Janet
I saw
Mills.
this. Yeah.
And so what's going on in Maine is there was a biological male that won a pole vaulting championship in a female division. And so this caused an investigation from the Department of Education because it's considered a Title IX
Oh, okay.
violation now
Sure,
under
sure.
Trump's new executive orders. And so while at this governor's meeting, Trump directly called out the governor of Maine and had a little banter with her. He goes, "You better comply because you're not going to get any federal funding." And so Janet Mills replies with, "Okay, I'll see you in court." And Trump is Trump and just keeps going with it. And he goes, quote, "I look forward to that. That should be a real easy one. And enjoy your life after governor because I don't think you'll be in elected politics." So, what are our takes on this? What do we think?
This is classic Trump.
Yeah.
You know, the first thing I wanted to add is Biden held these governors' meetings as well.
Yeah, this is a
The
typical
difference
thing.
is Biden didn't let the press in.
Really?
Yeah, no.
Oh.
And that's kind of the feeling that a lot of people, at least online, are having is it's this really fresh feeling, this good feeling of like competency.
Yeah.
That like in transparency. I mean, like for all the garbage that the libs spew about Trump and, you know, being a dictator and a fascist and Doge and all this stuff, it's like, you know, the cameras are on him. The
Right.
cameras are on all of this, and they're constantly answering questions from the press. And so that's the first thing I wanted to say was I really appreciate that, like, you know, you can actually turn on the news and it's not news anchors talking about it. Like,
Right.
you're actually seeing it happen, which I think is really necessary. I think that this does present some legal challenges, right? Like, her argument probably will be that she was following the state law or the federal law of the time.
Yeah. Okay.
And under the right, because
No,
if
I don't.
when did this person win this thing? Because
I
if
believe it was after.
was it after? Okay, well then there you go. Then it's wraps for her. But if she was following the Biden administration's, you know, executive orders or laws at the time, or attitudes at the time, she probably could argue that, you know, or the state could argue that they, you know, they were acting within the bounds of the law or the understanding of the law. Granted, if they don't change from here on out, which I think is what Trump's arguing, is like if they don't move and change their policy now, they will be at conflict with the federal government, and that could impact their ability to get funding. And
Yeah.
I don't see a problem with that at all. That's kind of
No,
the function
exactly.
of the federalist system. So
And just, you know, a couple days ago, this happened again in a skiing competition. A man placed third, and so it's a continuing thing.
yeah.
And so, yeah, there's definitely some tension here between Trump and the states, you know, that do support this. I guess I just wonder why is this the hill she's dying on?
That's a really good question.
And ultimately, how is this, you know, he makes a good point. I don't think you'll be in elected politics anymore, you know, he ends with.
I totally agree. Yeah.
Jackson, what about you?
yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I don't really have much of an opinion on this. I think she kind of. I don't really see the point to fight this. I mean, Maine's kind of an on and off state. I feel like it's been more blue as of recent, or
Yes, Maine does have a split electoral vote, but Maine goes more blue than it does red, except Maine's one of these, like Vermont
Yeah.
is a very conservative state. It's full of Christians, gun owners, generally conservative people, but they typically go blue just because of the population spread of the state. But yeah, Maine typically, I think they split it, I think they have 4 votes and they typically split it 3-1.
Okay.
One being the rural counties, and then 3 being, I think it's like Portland, Maine is one of their bigger towns, and then something else is that they'll typically. It's like the coastline is gets 3 votes, and then the rural gets 1, and 1 goes to red, and the rest go blue.
Okay.
That's typically how
Yep,
how
that's
it
what it
splits.
looks like it happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, continue.
Yeah, so I mean, I really don't see a point for trying to fight this here, because if most of the state tends to be more conservative, it's really just hurting her all around, and it's hurting the support of her state. It's hurting her credibility as governor.
Right.
It just seems like a bad idea for her.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And, I could see this happening maybe with like an abortion thing in other states or, something like that. But, I mean, men competing in high school girls' sports, like,
Yeah,
why,
well, and
why are we dying on that?
I'm
hill?
totally with you. It just, the political calculus here doesn't make much sense, because
No.
this is a your example of abortion is great, because that is kind of our, I wouldn't say it's to this extent, but the conservatives struggle with abortion for whatever reason. It's
Right.
just not the correct take isn't as popular as it ought to be.
Mm-hmm.
With this, it's similar. The Democrats really loved these identity, trans stuff, and they really went too far with it. And you're seeing across the country, in Loudoun County, Virginia. Virginia's a blue state, but what's the governor's name? Glenn Youngkin.
Mm-hmm.
He gets elected governor off of the coattails of all of that Matt Walsh stuff, all the trans stuff. And this is a losing issue for them. So I just don't understand why she would die on this hill. Like what you're saying, it doesn't make any sense, because exactly what Jackson's saying too, it not only singles her out as the only governor because I don't know if Pritzker and Newsom were even there, these
Yeah,
other,
I don't
or
know.
Hochul, these other liberal governors. But that's probably the better take to have, is just not show up, protest going,
Right.
rather than going and then putting a target not only on yourself, but on your state, and then thus your constituents, who really, don't have anything to do with your shenanigans in the
Right.
governor's meeting. And now, it's this total, and that's why I said the political calculus here just doesn't make any sense. This is not the issue to butt up against the president on. And that's not to say he doesn't have issues that the left could actually go after, and and they would be popular support for, notably abortion, notably Israel, notably. I mean, what's another one? You could pick they do talk about this with the corruption aspect of you've got these billionaires in the cabinet and stuff, which I think is a fair conversation to have. The left just likes to take it to Trump's a fascist. And once you start doing that, it's like, what are you, you're not, nobody's going to resonate with that the way that they would say, hey, maybe we have some questions about Elon Musk's involvement. And then everybody would go, oh, okay, maybe we can entertain that. But to go after trans sports, it's like, why would you set yourself up for failure like that? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Do we think this could be an ego thing from Janet Millis? I feel like we see a lot of stuff like this, especially with Ryan bringing up it's just stupid to have men in women's sports. Do we think this is, something that has just gone too far and they refuse to admit that they're wrong in it? Is this stubbornness that we're seeing from the left, or is this actually what they believe? Is this an ego thing?
That's a very good question.
Well, after the election, there was a large section of the left wing that said, we got to drop this super radical sexual theory stuff. This is not playing in the heartland. The blue wall that protects Democrats from losing elections runs through the heartland. It goes through Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Iowa. It's these states, it's Pennsylvania, it's the Rust Belt states. And the people who populate these states don't tolerate this kind of stuff. This stuff is just too much for them. A lot of people in the Midwest are kind of live and let live, and that's kind of for the worse when you talk about abortion. People are like, whatever, we don't really care. And that's a negative. But with this, it's It's like typically they are whatever, do what you want to do. But when you start coming after their kids and putting it in the
Right.
school system, and like, Jim's daughter is losing to a guy who was born a male,
Right.
people get really upset about that. And so I think the Democrats were right to have a conversation that's like, is this politically viable? Can we survive in the future if we don't tailor our message to fit where we need it to fit? And I'm with you, Jackson. I just don't think that this is the one to do it. I think this is not the right issue, and they're going to do more harm than good. And then you get the other side of that coin, where there are Democrats who are ideologically cemented in the idea that gender is just a social construct,
Right.
that it can be whatever you want it to be, and to concede on this issue that they've been fighting for 10 years would be to concede the entire liberal framework. And so they can't do that. And so there's this infighting of like, do we moderate? Do we become slightly more conservative to win votes, in these specific areas, or do we stay true to the principle that we've been arguing for 10 plus years?
Right.
And so they're in this tight spot where they don't really have a great option either way. And so they're trying to hash that out. I'm interested to see where it goes from here, because you're right. Like, I don't think the people of Maine would tolerate, like, if Trump comes out and he's like, yeah, we're going to cut funding. We'll just take your funding from you, and then you're on your own. Granted, Maine doesn't have like natural disasters and stuff, but I guarantee you they rely heavily on, federal subsidies.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see. And I think you're right, Tatiana, where you say, you highlight the Trump comment where he says, you'll never have political office again. She probably won't.
Well, and going off of that, the Maine Wire, which is a local paper in Maine, has found that her disapproval rating has climbed to her all-time high since this statement. She's at 49% disapproval rating.
Wow.
And those who do agree with her, their top issues are abortion, her handling of COVID-19, and a little bit with the economy, but mostly it's just abortion. And so you don't even see the LGBTQ in there at all.
Right. It just...
And so,
Yeah.
it does not make sense at all.
Well, speaking of governors,
Yes.
our next segment is about the announcement of Vivek Ramaswamy running for Ohio State Governor. So Vivek Ramaswamy officially announced his candidacy for Ohio Governor on Monday. Vivek ran against Donald Trump in the primary election, and then later dropped out and endorsed Donald Trump. From there, he was looked at to be a co-chair of Doge with Elon Musk until right about Christmas, where the online right wing had a little bit of a discussion over a immigration visa program called the H-1B. And Vivek came out, he aligned himself with the pro H-1B crowd, which really upset a lot of Trump's base, who believe that the campaign and this administration has been animated on, restricting immigration. And the H-1B program, for those who don't know, is a selective immigration status for higher skilled workers. What you see in practice is hundreds of thousands of Indians and Chinese people coming over and taking tech jobs, you know? And so that's what it looks like in practice. And so there was all this controversy over it. So Trump had to sever ties with Vivek, and he took him off Doge, and then Vivek actually went silent for a very long time. He didn't tweet for weeks. He didn't make a public statement, and then he came out and he kind of walked back his stuff, but he didn't really. And then there were all these questions like, what's Vivek going to do? Is Trump going to put him in a different spot? Is his career over? And then there were these rumors. So he's announced that he's running for governor of Ohio. Another thing is he has J.D. Vance's campaign team on the ground with him in Ohio. And they did a good job with Vance, and Vance is Mr. Ohio. And so, I think this is, Vivek's got a good start. Let's say that. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out. Do you know when exactly the election is?
It's not this year. I believe it's the following year.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, because I'd like to know when it is and how long he's got a campaign and all that. I would assume probably, spring of 26. Aren't gubernatorial elections usually in the
2026.
spring?
Yeah, it's. Oh, no, it's
Is
November.
it in the
It's
fall?
November.
Okay,
November
okay.
3rd,
Yeah, I'm
2026.
wrong about that.
Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, what do we think? Do we, is this a good thing for the movement? Is this a good thing for Vivek? What are your thoughts?
So I don't know a ton about Vivek personally.
Yeah,
I'm not like a huge all in for him type of person.
I agree.
I guess we just don't know a lot about him. He kind of just came up and
Yep.
took a spot, and
Yeah.
so I'm not somebody who's all out for him, but he definitely seems to be aligned with the Trump campaign for the most part.
Yeah.
Especially at things that would affect the state level.
Yeah.
And so I think that would be good.
Yeah.
I think he's a strong candidate as far as he's able to win. And I think that's always good. And I think that will I think state is a better role for him too, because he's just getting into politics.
Yeah.
He
right.
has, no prior experience. And, we saw Trump come in with no prior experience, but at the same time, he ran a business that.
Well, and he was like the most famous guy in America.
Right.
Like
exactly.
forever.
And he knew a lot of the politics just from that, where Vivek, we really don't know what he knows, and how well he can run something, so I think this will be a good starting point for him. And yeah. What about you, Jackson?
I feel like with Vivek, this is kind of a smart play for him, especially with the H-1B stuff. That was just kind of not a good play on his part. But and we're seeing a lot of like Doge becoming kind of a meme. Like it's not really being taken as seriously as I think he first anticipated. And so by him going back and trying to run for governor in Ohio, it's going to give him the chance to win more favorability among Ohio, and also potentially set him up for a presidential race again in 2028. I could very well see him try again. I think in the primaries it's going to look like J.D. Vance and Vivek, and I think by Vivek going back to Ohio and trying to win the favorability of Ohio, it's going to help him get that spot
Right.
rather than Vance.
Yeah, I think ultimately, I don't think Vivek will have any chance against Vance, just because the vice president role. And they're both from Ohio, so they can't both be, president, vice president. But that is an interesting point to make to it. This is definitely going to help him if he does want to go back to that race, which I imagine he would.
Yeah. So I looked it up real quick. He's got this Attorney General Dave Yost running against him. He's a conservative.
Okay.
Mike DeWine I think Mike DeWine wasn't
He's
Mike DeWine.
current.
He's current, but he's not running again. But is he a Democrat?
No, he's a Republican, I thought.
I know. The
He's
reason why I'm
Republican.
getting thrown off is because he's squish.
He doesn't vote Republican.
He doesn't
Or I
follow
guess
the GOP
he's not a
orthodoxy
voter,
or
but
whatever.
yeah, you know
so
what I'm saying.
yeah. So Vivek's gonna have this challenge from Dave Yost, so we'll see how it goes. Like, I wonder what Ohioans think. Because there's going to be a juxtaposition here of like, he probably is going to be running against people who were born in Ohio, lived in Ohio,
Right.
stayed in Ohio, have worked in politics in Ohio. And Vivek is like this guy who just, his parents immigrated here, and then he left to go to Yale, and then he
Yeah.
did that, like medical startup thing that there's a lot of weird questions about,
He's also, one thing that's always bothered me with him is he's not very transparent.
Not at all.
He's very sly with the term I would use.
And I'm going to come straight out and say it because I know some people don't like when you talk about this, but I think the biggest thing that causes a lot of distrust for me, this is one of the biggest things, is Vivek ran hard in the heartland. He ran in Christian America.
Yeah.
And he kept saying God. And he would
But-
tweet God,
yeah.
and he would talk about God.
And he'd say there's only
And
one God.
there's only one God, which he's a Hindu, and Hindus believe in a monotheistic God, a one God.
Mm-hmm.
And so but he never said that. He never
No,
campaigned on that.
He
But
came across as if he was a
right,
Christian.
exactly. And anybody who doesn't have the time to research or want to know would just believe that here's this guy talking about God in a
Right.
room full of Christians, and he's saying all these things that we agree with, but he doesn't mean it. And so that's where, like, people were giving the comparison to Vivek is the right-wing Barack Obama, that he showed up out of nowhere and says all the right things, but maybe doesn't mean everything that he says. And so it's just like, this is no knock on Vivek. I think that's my thing, is he says a lot of great things
Yeah.
that I agree with, that I quite frankly support. It's just, we don't know who he is. He came out of nowhere. I don't think he's conservative. Like, he like, what does it mean to be a conservative? We get into that. Like, he's conservative insofar as he says he is.
But we don't know
But we
anything
just
of it.
don't know.
Yeah.
And we forget that, like, this Trump ride has been long. And like, the 2016 is almost 10 years ago. And like, we forget that Trump really ran in 16 against politicians using their words to con the Americans into voting for them, and only for them to go to Washington to not serve their interests. And he was so anti-establishment, and it was all about trust and about the being right on the message. And so I still hold this, and it's not just for Vivek, it's for everybody. I quite frankly have some of these feelings for Vance.
Right.
Like, for all these people, it's like they're just new, and I need to know more before I can throw support behind them. I think Vivek will do well, though. I think
so too.
Yeah.
And I think we're gonna see if these things that we've said are really true.
Yeah.
If maybe he is a conservative and we just don't know, and so I think this is a great place for him to start.
Yeah.
And take on a role and let the people see who he really is. And
yeah.
whether that be good or bad, I don't mean that in necessarily a negative way. He may be great, but we just don't know, like you said.
Yeah, and Jackson, to your point, I totally agree. I think, I hope that Vivek would do this because he loves Ohio, and he wants to represent the constituents of Ohio, and he
Yeah.
wants to make sure that they are represented. And he, but I can't help but recognize that he's probably just running so he can platform in 28.
That's what I'm kind of thinking.
It's like, and then
He doesn't want people to forget about
right,
him.
exactly, and he wants to stay in the zeitgeist,
Which is the game
and
of politics.
Totally agree, and don't knock him for that. It's just, we could do a whole podcast on this, but he does want to if he does want to run in 28, he's going to have to position himself in the same vein as somebody like Ron DeSantis, a
Yeah.
governor, a
Yeah.
good governor of a red state. He's going to want to have to run against people who have been governors, like Nikki Haley, who will definitely run again. And you'd see a primary, Republican primary in 28. This is why I don't think it's actually as much of a lock for Vance, is because I can name you 4 people right now that will probably run in 28. You got Vance. You probably have Haley. You probably have DeSantis. You probably have Vivek. You could probably throw a guy like Glenn Youngkin in there, governor
Yeah.
of Virginia, who was supposed to run in 24 but chose not to. Very smartly, because could you imagine if he would have? Because that's the question: did Ron DeSantis ruin his chances for 28 by running in 24?
Yeah.
Right, and it allowed for a guy like Vance to come in and take his spotlight as like the Trump successor. Where like if DeSantis would have just stayed out of it and just not done anything and not ran and not thrown shade, could DeSantis be the vice president right now?
That's a good question. I think there's a lot of reasons Trump chose Vance specifically for his background, though, that you can't just find in anyone.
No, yeah,
And so
I agree.
I don't know,
Yeah.
but it's a good question.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think he'll do good. I
Yeah.
think he'll do good.
Okay, moving on to our next segment. This one's kind of a fun one. Aleph, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Aleph Aeronautics paves the way for the first flying car. So this is kind of cool, also kind of scary and just weird. But Aleph Aeronautics is a company that's based in the U.S., and they recently released a video showing a car that had a vertical takeoff and then flew over an SUV. So kind of like hovering. When I say flying, I don't
Like a
mean like
hovercraft, yeah.
yeah, I don't mean like in the sky, but it was able to vertically lift up and go over another car. And so the CEO kind of came out and talked about it a little bit, and he says that he has thousands of pre-orders, and he's hoping to begin production this year. So we'll see if that happens. It's the car itself seats one person, so it's not like something you could just take people on a joyride with you with. But it is gonna sell for about $300,000. So yeah, I don't know. So I thought this would just be a fun thing to throw in there. What do we think of this? Do we think it's realistic?
I mean, in all honesty, I think it has an airborne range of only 68 miles, and that's just not realistic for the normal average driver nowadays.
Yeah.
And to be able to do these things, it has to have like a ton of lithium ion, which I want all the listeners to just take a second and look up a lithium ion mine because they are scary.
Yeah.
Like if you think that oil rigs are bad, this is gonna reality check is gonna hit ya. And I actually did a little bit of research. Each ton of lithium contributes about 15 tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere.
Oh wow.
So that's kind of disproportionate to how much we're going to be able to see this happen. And then, I mean, lithium ion is extremely hard to recycle. And
Yeah.
when you do recycle it, it's extremely expensive. So I just don't think we realistically had the budget to do this. And I mean, I watched a video of it flying, and I don't think it's going to be street legal to fly it like that.
No,
And
it kind of reminded me of like those little things you get as a kid, like those little helicopters and whatnot, and you're learning to fly it, and you kind of just zigzag, and you're like, grr, grr.
You know what it reminded me of?
What?
You ever seen Iron Man 2?
Yes.
Do you know when he's in Congress and then he hacks the thing and then
Yep.
he shows all the people like trying to make the Iron Man suit and
Yeah.
it's just like falling apart? I think this is spook. It's like
Yeah.
that we've been saying we're gonna have flying cars for like 50
And
years.
somebody figured
you
out the
know?
technology. They're like, oh, I'm gonna make millions.
Yeah, it can hover and like
But,
it's
yeah.
like it's not gonna be a Star Wars pod racer. You
No.
know, like you're not gonna get a speeder.
So
Uh,
eventually,
that'd be cool though.
do we think that's a possibility in the future? Like,
Heck
do you think,
yeah.
Do you think
Everything's
people,
a possibility.
Do you think people will actually invest in something like the research for something like that, or do you think we're just kind of like good with what we got?
not this kind of vehicle. I think it needs different technology to work.
Yeah.
I mean, I was looking at the website for Aleph, and it says it's a low-speed vehicle, so it's definitely not going to work well on a normal road,
Yeah.
whether you're flying it or not. And then I don't think that electric is going to be the way that we do this. I've thought about it a lot because I'm kind of a nerd and love sci-fi, but I think the best way to do it is magnets.
Oh,
If we put a magnet as the road rather than cement, and then we use magnets for the tires rather than wheels, I feel like that might work better, but electricity is just not going to work well like that.
that is a really interesting idea.
Yeah, wow, you should like
So
sell that to the
we
government.
got a business major, we got an engineering major, we got two business majors.
Oh wait, take that
marketing
out.
and business.
Take that out. I don't want people to steal it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's copyright pending.
Yeah.
That's patent pending right there.
So our final segment tonight is about the Wisconsin state budget. Time to renew our budget and take a look at it. So Governor Evers came out with some changes to it, and some of which are very shocking, not very happy about. The first one that I want to touch on is his IVF initiative. He's trying to promote IVF, is what he said. But within that, he's changed the language in this section. And he now refers to mothers as inseminated persons
Wow.
and fathers as spouse.
Wow.
Yeah. And his claim is that he wants to be sure that there's like legal certainty for these mothers.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm like, I'm pretty sure everyone knows what.
Yeah, we know exactly where this is going to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we know what you mean when you say mom.
Yeah.
You don't have to come up with a different word for it.
Exactly.
There's never been an issue. Like, come on. So this kind of got some responses nationwide, which is kind of interesting to see. But Brett Baer covered the topic, I know. Brett Favre actually came out on X and just...
Goat.
He just retweeted it and just said, nonsense. And
Good for Brett.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then the director of the Republican Governors Association just talked about how, as a mother, how offensive it is to just be reduced to just this inseminated person. Like, there's so much more to motherhood than just that.
A label, yeah.
Right? Like it's just sad and honestly kind of gross. Like, seriously, like that's what we're labeling people as now. So yeah, that's kind of the first change. Do you want to maybe touch on that a little? What do we think?
Yeah, I mean, the language is definitely stupid. I really don't see the point to doing this. I get that it's a whole, like, LGBTQ transgender people
Yeah.
thing, but it's really unnecessary because no matter how much you want to, a man will never get pregnant. There's just no way.
I think the changing of the language presents some challenges, and I think when I say we know exactly where this is going, I can elaborate on that.
Yeah.
This IVF is controversial for a few reasons. The first reason is hardline conservatives just don't believe in IVF. Period. Like as a thing, they think it's immoral, which I'm not going to talk about right now. The second one, which I think most conservatives can kind of get behind, is the commodification of the human person.
Right.
And we're seeing, and this is not just a liberal thing. Like guys like Dave Rubin have done this, where you can pay to have IVF, artificially inseminate the womb of someone who will carry your child for you, surrogate, and then will have the child and then turn the child over to you per the contract, so you and your gay husband can live with a child. And that presents even more challenges. And so I think
Right.
that kind of is where this is going. Is there's been all this controversy over IVF in general during the election, which Trump has taken his stance on. But I think that this is kind of smart on behalf of Evers, that he's looking forward and he's recognizing that as political trends shift. I mean, at some point, IVF could be on the block, and then we're going to have a national discussion about
Yep.
it. And he's preemptively putting these safeguards in place that say in 10 years we have a discussion where it's like people, we're going to start. We start talking about, like, is it right for a child to not have a mother, to not have to grow up away from
Right.
its natural mother? Is that right? Like, we need to start we think so much about individual rights. But we do that at the expense of, like, the child's rights. That child has
Yeah,
rights
that's
too.
so fair.
So maybe at some point we'll have this discussion, like, could legislation be passed to prevent situations like that? And then Evers would have these safeguards in place where it's like, no, our law says inseminated person and spouse, and he can use those linguistically or legally to protect. And so that's where I'm thinking he's going with this.
I think even more than that too. I think it's just dehumanizing.
Yeah.
That's the entire abortion argument, is they dehumanize the baby or the fetus, clump of cells, however you want to state, that living person. And this is the same idea where there's not any emotion tied to these words.
Yeah.
And it eventually just takes away any meaning. And when you dehumanize someone, you can do very, very evil things.
Yeah, very nasty things legally.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Yeah. And I think the final thing that we wanted to touch on with the Wisconsin state budget proposal, which I think is going to hit home for a lot of Wisconsin listeners, is that the Wisconsin state DNR is losing money annually. And it's reported that they lose about $15.5 million a year.
Yeah.
And Evers is looking to make them profitable. And the way that he's proposing, one way, or the main way in this bill that he's proposing that we do it, is by raising resident fish and hunting license fees. So this proposal would, if passed, would raise the cost of a fishing license for a Wisconsin resident from $19 to $30.
Oh my goodness.
It would raise a hunting license from $20 to $41.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
It would raise a small game hunting license, so rabbits, foxes, fur bearers, from $15 to $35
Wow.
for residents.
So it just gets worse.
Yeah, and so the good news is this can only be passed through the legislature,
Okay, good.
right? And so like this doesn't just go into effect, and thankfully we have a Republican legislature for the time being. If they are willing to protect their own interests and not
Yeah.
redistrict themselves out of a seat, that's a whole nother topic we could get into. But if so I think there will be pressure against this, and it shouldn't go through. But I wanted to give a couple alternatives. That's like, I think that this, and just say my piece a little bit on this. I think in principle, it's good to want to make the DNR as profitable as possible, help the DNR. I'm a sportsman myself. I was fishing last weekend. I'm going to go fishing this weekend. I hunt in all fall. You know that. And it's a passion of mine. And I think it's really disgusting, quite frankly, that we would be penalizing Wisconsin residents to participate in our heritage. This state has a long heritage of hunting and fishing that's passed down through generations. And if you start raising the prices of all this stuff, you're going to just price people out. Granted, people would go, oh, it's $40, just pay the $40. Yeah, sure. But like if you're struggling or and you want to fish and you want to hunt and you want to hunt small game and you want to hunt anything else, you got to pay for 5 different licenses. And if they all cost $40, that's a lot of money.
Right.
And this is a tradition that has been passed down from generation to generation in our state. And if you're pricing people out of participating in their heritage, that's totally immoral and wrong. There's a couple ways we could fix this DNR problem without raising the fees for residents. The first one is we got to look at the DNR and try and cut wasteful spending, because the DNR has a lot of programs where they're teaching people about things, which is good in theory, but in practice it just costs more money than people are actually paying to participate. So we're losing a ton of money. We don't need to be doing that. The second is I read you could some states have had private sponsorships.
Oh.
So there's 2 companies. One's called Ducks Unlimited and Pheasants Forever is the second one. They partner with states to protect wetlands and grasslands for waterfowl and upland birds, which would allow. There's something in the provision which allows states to tap into federal resources if they have these public-private partnerships or something. That's what I read. A third would be increased non-resident fees rather than resident fees.
Yeah, that makes
so
sense.
states out west do this a lot because they have big game. They have like elk and mule deer and stuff. And Colorado makes these non-residents pay like an insane amount of money to go out and hunt in their state. And it drives a ton of revenue. Granted, we don't have a big game animal, which I guess we could get to because I'm going to talk about this in a second. But, like people who come here and want to hunt or fish, let's take hunting out because Wisconsin hunting is perfect. It's great, but it's not as popular as our fishing. We have so much fishing in this state. We have some of the best lakes in the country, and people come here to fish. They come here to catch walleye and muskie. And if you could significantly raise their fees, force them to pay these prices, take on that burden rather than the resident, you'd be sending a message to the resident that you care about people being here. If you want to fish, and pay cheap, you should live here. You should invest in the community, not just be a destination fisherman or hunter. The fifth or the fourth would be we could institute reasonable logging practices. Okay. We have millions of acres of untouched public land that is not being used. And there's 2 problems with this. One, there's a lot of resources there that can be used responsibly. You can log responsibly. You're not just cutting down the forest and leaving it down. You plant. And 2, it hurts the habitat for the wildlife, which encourages people to come here. And this brings me to my final point, which is the importance of maintaining a healthy deer population for the hunters.
Yeah.
If you want to come and hunt in the state, we might as well we need to have deer for you to hunt.
Yeah, exactly.
We've got a lot of issues in the state with cold, and specifically with the wolf population that
Okay.
kills a lot of deer. The state hates the individuals when it comes to this.
Yeah.
The wolf in the state of Wisconsin the wolf population has gone completely out of control. The DNR, quite frankly, lies about the numbers. There are more wolves than they're reporting. They kill everything in their path.
Yeah.
But the state doesn't allow anybody to kill them. There's no hunting season to manage their
What's
population
the reasoning?
because they're federally protected. They're protected status because they were hunted to extinction. And like 20 years, then they were totally out of our state. We didn't have any of them left. 20 plus years ago, the DNR came out and reintroduced the wolf into the state of Wisconsin. The difference is, you're the science person.
Mm-hmm.
The evolution of the wolf that was in Wisconsin for all these years, it learned to hunt deer. They reintroduced a Canadian timber wolf population, which is used to hunting moose and elk. And so they have this huge appetite, and they eat everything in their path. That's not just the deer, that's livestock.
Yeah.
And where we have problems is these farmers and homeowners are losing dogs. They're losing livestock to the wolves. And you legally you will get hit with a felony and you will go to jail if you shoot and kill a wolf that's trying to kill your livestock on your own property. You are committing a serious felony. You will lose your ability to buy a gun. You can't buy a fishing and hunting license if you get caught doing this. They really are aggressive about the wolf. You know, this is another way. I talked about big game hunting. You know how many people would want to come and participate in a wolf hunt? And that's, I know that's like, like you should do it for the hunt for the right reasons. That's true, but there is an economic component to hunting. If you could incentivize people to come here and pay a freaking ton of money to buy out-of-state non-resident licenses and tags and come out here and pay a guide and buy a hotel room for 6 days. I mean, this is incentivizing people to participate in the local economy. And when we're handicapped, we can't do that. And so I just think this is a laundry list of ways we could approach this issue without raising the fees for the residents of the state to participate in the natural beauty of the state.
Yeah.
It's just wrong. And so that's my piece. I'm a hunterman. I'm a hunter. I'm a fisherman. And so this is a passionate thing for me. And it's not like I can't pay $40 for a hunting license.
Right, but
it's just in principle, you're going to get a lot of people who want to do it and probably can't. And that's unfair because our state has always had it as a pastime. And it's been passed down through generations. It's a cultural part of the framework of our state. So that's my piece on this.
And the left is one to talk about elitism so much and how only the elite can do certain things. And now they're promoting that, hunting's going to become just for the wealthy.
Yeah, just like it was in medieval England.
I was just going to say, that's how it used to be. Yeah. Any other thoughts, Jackson, on this?
I mean, the wolf thing especially, that kind of hit close to home because my grandpa, he's a big hunter, and he's been out a lot, and he was deer hunting actually last year, and he hunts in northeastern Wisconsin, and he actually encountered a wolf, and it was a really close call for him. He had to pretty much take his four-wheeler and speed out of there because, you can't shoot him, and sure, maybe self-defense, but it's still, like, really, it's got to be, like, the perfect, you got to have the evidence for it.
Yeah, there was a case this year, actually, of a 14-year-old duck hunter who shot and killed a wolf. In duck hunting, you got to wake up hella early and get out there in the super early AM, and it came up on him in the dark, and he shot and killed it. And he did the responsible thing. He called the DNR out. They came. They booked him. They arrested him.
Wow.
And he took it to court. And the court actually upheld that he shot in fear of his life. And so all the charges were dropped.
Good.
He was acquitted, which is great precedence. But to your point, Jackson, I've heard, because my family has a cabin in northern Wisconsin, Sawyer County. It's snowmobiling territory. People are saying, these snowmobilers are saying, when you run into these wolves on the trail, they don't even fear humans because they don't know us as predators. They just know us as people. They just know us as these other life forms that just exist, and they don't have any natural predators, and they don't have us to hunt them or fear us as predators, and so they just don't fear us.
Wow.
And that's going to present more challenges where, like, you know, you get your kid out there, you're out there, and you
Oh,
it's
gosh.
you get
Yeah.
you get a horrifying situation that I think would probably cause significant enough backlash to maybe change some things. But yeah, no, thanks for sharing that, because that is you sparked my memory. People are saying these things, they're not scared of people anymore.
Yeah. Wow.
It's pretty crazy. Pretty crazy. All right, well, this has been a great episode. Thank you for listening to Right on Campus. We post this podcast weekly where we tackle current events and life as a conservative on campus. If you'd like to learn more about UW-Eau Claire College Republicans, join our meetings on Monday nights in Centennial 1704 at 7 p.m. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and favorite and share this podcast if you're listening on Spotify. Also, be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at UWEC College Republicans. Have a great night. Thank you for listening to Right on Campus. We post this podcast once a week where we talk about current events and life as a conservative on campus. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at UWEC College Republicans. Have a great night and see you next time.